Today, we are exploring one of the most influential theoretical essays in architectural history, Transparency, Literal and Phenomenal by Colin Rowe and Robert Slatsky. Originally published in 1963, with the second part later, this essay is short, but extraordinarily dense. It fundamentally reshaped how architects think about space, perception, and modernism. At the time, modern architecture celebrated glass. Transparency was understood as literal visibility. Glass curtain walls, open plans, continuous surfaces. But Rowe and Slatsky asked, is transparency only about a glass? Their answer was no. They introduced a crucial distinction: literal transparency, phenomenal transparency. And the distinction changed architectural discourse forever. Let's start with the obvious definition. Literal transparency refers to the physical see-through qualities: glass walls, open facades, visual permeability. Modernist architecture, especially after World War, equated transparency with progress. Think of glass and steel buildings that dissolve boundaries between inside and outside. A classic example is Le Corbusier's Villa Savoye, with its ribbon windows and open plan, or the glass towers of Mies van der Rohe, where structure and enclosure become visually minimal. In these cases, transparency is optical. You can literally see through the surface. But Rowe and Slatsky argue that this is a shallow definition, because transparency as a spatial experience is much more complex. So let's talk about phenomenal transparency. Phenomenal transparency is not about physical transparency. It is about perceptual layering. It occurs when space is organized in such a way that multiple spatial readings are possible simultaneously. In other words, you perceive overlapping systems, ambiguous depths, spatial tension. To explain this, Rowe and Slatsky turn not only to architecture but to painting. They compare modernist architecture to Cubist paintings by artists like Pablo Picasso and George Braque. In Cubism, forms overlap, foreground and background interpenetrate. Planes coexist ambiguously. You cannot fully separate front from back. This is a phenomenal transparency. It is mental, not material. And here's the key insight. A solid wall can produce phenomenal transparency. A glass wall may not. Rowe and Slatsky famously compared two buildings: the Bauhaus buildings by Walter Gropius, Le Corbusier's villa at the Gauche. The Bauhaus has large glass curtain walls, literal transparency, but spatially its volume as straightforward and layered sequentially. In contrast, Le Corbusier's villa, though more opaque, contains layered spatial grids and interlocking volumes. In the result, Le Corbusier achieves phenomenal transparency, and Gropius achieves literal transparency. This argument sadly critiques simplistic modernist assumptions. Transparency is not a material quality. It is an organizational condition. Phenomenal transparency produces spatial depth without relying on perspective illusion. Instead of one dominant vanishing point, you experience multiple axes, overlapping planes, simultaneous readings. This anticipates later architectural thinking about space as a field condition rather than a fixed enclosure. It also deeply influenced the postmodern and the late modern theorists, including Rowe's and later work in Collage City. Phenomenal transparency encourages ambiguity, and ambiguity in architecture can be intellectually and spatially rich. So why is this essay so important? Because it reframes modern architecture Instead of equating modernism with glass and openness, Rowe and Slatsky show that real innovation lies in spatial organization. This has major implications. You don't need glass to achieve complexity. Minimalism can still contain layer depths. Perception is structured by geometry. For architects, this is liberating. It shifts focus from surface to structure, from facade to spatial composition. It also bridges architecture and art theory. By connecting architecture to Cubism, the authors situate modern buildings within the broader aesthetic movements. So now let's summarize the core lessons of transparency. 1. Transparency has two forms: literal equal physical visibility, phenomenal equal perceptual layering. 2. Spatial organization matters more than material alone. 3. Architecture can create ambiguity intentionally. 4. Modernism is deeper than glass facades. 5. Perception is constructed, not automatic. More than 60 years after publication, transparency, literal and phenomenal, remains fundamental in architectural education. It teaches us to look carefully, not just at what we see, but at how we see. In an age of hyperglass skyscrapers and digital rendering, Rowe and Slatsky's insight feels especially relevant. Transparency is not about exposure, it is about a depth. You can design a fully glazed building that feels flat, or you can design a solid structure that feels spatially rich and layered. Transparency, in its highest form, is intellectual. It requires composition, structure, and perceptual complexity. Thanks for watching. We reviewed this book and hope you will have the opportunity to read the actual text and learn more about it. And still, we are just halfway up the ladder of the knowledge of all of architecture, art, and the design, and more. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.